Behind Greatness is a podcast series exploring the journeys and personal insights of successful leaders, anchored on themes of resilience and leadership. Each interview aims to inspire listeners to stop at nothing short of their dreams. Brought to you by Inspire North, a nonprofit organization connecting youth with today's leaders. Ready? Let's get inspired.
Welcome to our Behind Greatness podcast. Today we have a special guest, Melissa Grelo. Melissa Grelo was a longtime co-host of the most watched morning news program CP24 Breakfast in Greater Toronto area, and she anchored and reported on the biggest stories in Canada's largest news market. She was also she had and gave front row perspective when she co-hosted CTV's Olympic morning program for Vancouver Olympic 2010 from Whistler, British Columbia. Also covered and covers TIFF, Toronto International Film Festival, since 2009, both in Toronto and also reporting from Los Angeles. She has won many awards, especially from CTV for reporting in CP24 from the prestigious Academy Awards. She co-hosted Santa Claus Parade and CTV since 2010, and the list goes on and on. Today, she's the co-host of The Social. That's her bio. How we know Melissa is through somewhat of a different channel. So Melissa has been part of Inspire for a number of years, and she spoke with us and for us in one of our events north of Toronto in 2015, something like that. And we've been tied to her since. She's had no choice. So we welcome Melissa. She's been very gracious and has agreed to be one of our earlier guests on our first season of Behind Greatness. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the lovely introduction.
Our pleasure. I'm sure I made some mistakes that I'll be slapped for, but right now we're on camera, we're okay. I have 20 minutes to survive. Melissa, so I know we have limited time together. Every time you and I have had discussions, not frequently, but every time we have, they've been full of very good perspective. I've learned, and since you and I spoke the first time, you've been progressing your career in media. Mm-hmm. You've had your side hustles. You've been a mother and a wife, and you've done 1,000 other things.
Yes, I'm exhausted. No.
Well, you don't look it, so congrats. It's all the caffeine. So bring us to a little bit to the beginning. So give us a little bit about your background, because we want to know what makes you tick, and we want to know what has been or what have been your obstacles in your lifetime. We want to talk about some of the gems that you and I have spoken about earlier. So give us start kind of from the beginning. So where were you from? How was your upbringing, and where did your path lead?
How the heck did I get here? Yeah. It's an interesting story when I reflect on it, because I'm a girl who was born and raised on a horse farm in rural Caledon, Ontario, and back then, still is rural now, but back then it was really rural. And so I'm a girl who came from the country, and I'm now living out my dream in the biggest city in Canada. So it's kind of an interesting story even for myself, because I can't believe it, probably more than anything. And so my family business is horses, and my father immigrated to Canada from Portugal. And my sister and I've got a younger sister, we lived out his dream in Caledon on the horse farm. And by all accounts, a family business often gets handed down to the children if they so desire. But as much as I love horses, I'm certainly not as talented or as passionate the way my father is. And I knew from an early age that my trajectory was going to be different. I just didn't know what that was. And so...
Let me interrupt you. Mm-hmm. How did you know?
I think there was stuff about horses that I loved, like the performance stuff that we would do. Mm-hmm. I loved being in front of an audience, and I loved performing, and I loved putting on a different persona sometimes. But I will also had aspirations for the big city lights. And that's where my mother comes into the story, because she immigrated to Canada from the Philippines and immediately got a job with the government in downtown Toronto. And she ended up finding and meeting this Portuguese guy with this wild and crazy horse dream, but she went along with him and commuted for 25 years from rural Caledon to downtown Toronto. Wow. And whenever we had a day off school, we didn't have childcare, so my sister and I would travel with her into the city. And I got a taste for the city that never left. And I said, I need to be here. And so the energy and just knowing that that was going to be much more of my future than a rural existence. And that's where, if, you know, as things go with the family business, we teach, we train, we coach. And I very quickly picked up the family business, and I was coaching kids riding from a young age. And that's where teaching first entered my life. And in fact was the trajectory that I followed up until the end of university and afterwards, and I became a teacher. And I taught grade 7 and 8, and I really enjoyed it, and started my master's in education, which I discontinued when I hit a wall. And I call that my classic quarter life crisis. I was probably about 25, maybe 26. And that was really the first reckoning of my life, to say, I've had all this education and I've spent money and I've invested time and all of these things, but something's missing. And that is where I found television. Through working with a business coach who was, you know, psychologist by training, but at the time had the title of business coach. We worked together and found that journalism was perhaps something that I should explore. And then when I started to do a little bit of delving in, I never looked back. And to be honest, from there to today has happened like that, because my dad has a saying that when you're on the right path, the angels and saints are behind you. So thanks, Dad. Thanks, okay. Angels and saints.
So we're done now.
And done.
So let's go back a little bit, because you gave us a condensed version of probably many stories that you skipped over. I'm not necessarily looking for a story, because that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for lessons you learned in your path. So let's go back to your path a little bit. So you went to university. You decided that you wanted to be a teacher. You decided that's a path you were going to take. You were a teacher. You were teaching. Something happened. What is it that happened, and what did you do? So you said teacher, coach, and in transition. Slow it down.
Okay, a big breakup happened.
Okay.
And people often view the ending of something always as a negative. And I think this is where this generation's discussions about endings or quitting or big changes, I think we're less afraid of those today. But back then, for someone like me who was raised with parents, immigrant parents, who are like, you get your education, you get a steady job, and you just like work till it's over, basically, right? You raise a family.
It was a linear path.
Absolutely, and that's what they expected. In fact, that's probably exactly why they came to Canada. Their own opportunities, but certainly for their children to have a steady, predictable, solid life.
Fair.
And I was raised with that mentality. But I was also raised by an entrepreneurial father who truly, from then to today, lives out his passion. Like, he wakes up every day and it's like he thirsts for what he does, and that's never waned. And I've also been raised with that. And so it's an interesting balance where you have opportunity this way. And the lesson was, after a huge breakup, I had been with my boyfriend at the time for 5 years, it precipitated something in me, which was, I want more, I need more, I deserve more. And so it was
out of yourself?
Out of life.
Okay.
That this was perhaps more safe. Being with him was maybe safe, and maybe all of a sudden this career choice is maybe too safe, and it starts to make you question everything.
Sure.
And that was the beginning. So thanks, ex-boyfriend who cheated on me.
Oh.
Because, what seems to be the most horrific thing in your life that feels like your whole world is ending, in retrospect, is a gift. You just don't know it at the time, right?
Sure.
Because if you did, you'd keep going instead of thinking, oh my God, I just need to sleep all day and all night. So it precipitated exactly what I needed at the time and didn't know. which was to start to question everything. And I did. And I think that's where you start to ask. And I think age, it's not a joke to say quarter life crisis, because you've done all this work and education or training or what have you. You're starting to realize the decisions I'm making now are going to matter for the rest of my life.
Sure.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I say that yes and no because it sounds like so heavy and so full of pressure. And it is, which is also why I'm like, is this where I want to be for the rest of my life? No. It's not. And that forced the questioning of things that you're probably never supposed to question. Certainly not as the child of immigrants who've given all for you, right? And you're going to be like, steady pension down the road. I'm just going to toss that away and decide to go into journalism and broadcast television. They're like, what? I'm sorry, we don't even understand what you're saying. So it was a challenge to my own upbringing.
Sure.
It was a challenge to my expectations. It was a challenge of my parents' expectations. And yet, I, persevered and realized I did it anyway because there was no other option. I really felt like once you cross the line past the fear and you realize, okay, I'm still standing, and I'm like, okay, this is it. You realize you actually owe it to yourself today, and you owe it to your tomorrow self to make the big decisions now. And I did. And so there's that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. And it's precisely what I did. And there's another saying, jump and the net will appear. And I really had to just take a leap of faith, and it worked out.
Okay, so before we get to how it worked out, so you decided to move into journalism, so to shift, right? A lateral shift into journalism, because you were still only a quarter century old, right?
Yes.
How did you shift over to that path, and what did your trajectory look like starting from day one? What is it that you did? What is it that you think others looked past in order to be quote unquote successful in what you're doing now?
I think belief in yourself. Once I was able to grab hold and control and own the fear, then there's no stopping you, or there shouldn't be any stopping you, because the scariest parts that you think are so scary, once you've actually confronted them, are actually not that scary. And I think every time you overcome a challenge, your confidence builds and your strength builds, belief in self builds, confidence builds. So when I realized, what journalism is something I want to pursue, I did what I think is still a very prudent thing, is do the training. So I found a post-secondary course. I wasn't going to just dive in and knock on a television station's door and be like, hey, I think you should hire me. I really wanted to go in there trained, knowing what I was doing. I had no experience in the industry. So I did all the right things still, but it was different this time. It was different than when I went to teachers college. It was different because there was a different fire. Perhaps for the first time, a fire lit in my belly, like deep in my belly. And, passion is a great alarm clock. There was no morning that I didn't wake up and just be like, I need to go and conquer and do, and I can't get enough of this. I mean, there was truly that feeling, and I knew I was doing right by me because I just couldn't sleep. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get to school every day because I was so excited. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I've heard from numerous students, past and present, who have shared the teachers that I had when I was in school for journalism, that they often will say the same things about me, which is, Melissa was different. And I take that as a compliment because I was there a little older, only by a few years, but I'd had already a bit of a career under my belt. So I wasn't 19, I was, like I said, quarter life crisis. I was probably 26. I went in there with a lot more purpose. I went in there with a very clear goal every single day. I wasn't there to pitter patter. I was there to learn. And if you were there to teach me, then teach me everything you can. I really went in there with extreme purpose, and that fired me up. I was doing more assignments that I needed to. I said, just throw it at me. Like, what is it that I need to learn to walk out of here and get a job? And I was hungry. And people will say, the teachers always say, that Melissa, you just knew she was going places. And I think that's the difference when you live life with purpose, is you don't waste time because you are driven by something bigger. You're being driven by the dream. You're being driven by knowing what you need to give to yourself, like how you must just live. And I'm not an artist or creative by nature, but that's where I understand about the creative process, that if you don't do it for yourself, you feel like you're going to die, you know, like that's how extreme some days were. And I don't mean it to say like that's disturbing. It was purpose. And that's what happened is I went there and I graduated earlier than I should have because I was smarter than other people. And what I say smarter is I knew the prerequisite for graduating the course was getting an internship, but I said, I'm not going to try to get an internship at the end of the year when every other student is trying to get an internship. So I got an internship before I started my course and set it up so that I would start about halfway through, so I'd get some education, get some training in school, and that I'd have something to contribute by the time my actual internship started. But I wasn't competing with anybody for an internship. And so when I actually started my internship, I was halfway through my course, only halfway. And then the second day of my internship, they offered me an on-air job. And that never happens. I know that never happens because I'm in the industry now and I know how hard it is. And so they literally said, here are assignments, finish these assignments, then go. We'll give you your diploma. Just go because you got a job. That's the whole point of this course. So that's how it happened.
For you? The whole point of this course was to get a job.
Oh, 100%. It was the only point.
Okay.
I knew I was potentially going to have years of trying to break through the industry. That's what they tell you. They told you you're going to be ready.
In school.
Sure, and you get ready to move out of province, maybe start on the radio. You're not going to be in Toronto. You might have to move to Saskatchewan or Manitoba or wherever, not Ontario. It's the biggest market in Canada. Like, they told us what to prepare for. And I was like, it's not going to be me.
And you made it happen.
I made it happen.
So you shared with us a story in your in the event that you participated back a few years ago. I don't remember all the details, but I remember it's pretty impactful, even for me, for a guy who was more than a quarter century. You had just started at a TV station just north of Toronto. It was earlier on, and you had done some due diligence around the case. Do you remember this? Am I
keep
you had some due diligence without being asked? And you were reporting on some story that was about to break or breaking?
I was still an intern.
Okay, go. Tell us that.
That was the very first day of my internship. And it so happened at a news station. And it so happened that that was the day that a mass shooter had killed and shot many Mounties in Alberta. And the story was breaking, and it was my first day. I had been, not ready for that story because it was breaking news. But we were having a meeting in the newsroom to figure out. The news director was, not me. The news director was there to determine how are we going to cover the story today. It's breaking as we speak. And there's a man, and he's holed up, and he's killed RCMP officers. So huge story. And as he's talking and, telling, okay, you're going to do this angle, you're going to do this angle, I'm on a computer and I'm thinking, okay, well, what's out there now? So I'm just quickly trying to figure out the basic details of the story. And then it was like, well, who are these Mounties? Because the names had already started to get released. So I was very quickly amassing as much information as I could. And I actually ended up finding the photos of all of the Mounties that had been involved and named thus far. By the time the meeting was over, I was like, well, here are the photos of all the Mounties that are involved, some who had already sadly been killed. And everyone's like, what? Where'd you even get this? And I'm like, well, you were busy, but I was like over here. And it was like, those are the moments when you realize if you're going to do this, you don't wait for anyone to tell you what to do. You're already anticipating the next move. It's like you're either there to help or get out of the way. And not only was I there to help, I wanted to lead the charge, but you're the new kid, literally. It's your first day. These people don't even know who I am.
Sure.
And in fact, many people said to me, who are you? I'm like, I'm the intern. And the idea was I made an impact, not because I was trying to make an impact. I was there to do something. I was there to be helpful. This is a small newsroom. You need all the help you can get. And I'm here to learn and I'm here to do. And that made an impact so much so that I think that that's probably why I was offered a job so quickly.
So afterwards, when we edit this, I'm going to take the last 3 minutes and I'm going to put that in my kids' room in the morning and put that on just on rotation, on replay. Do, just do it.
Just do it.
I'm glad I reminded you of that story because it's been a while since I. So let's segue very quickly into what you also are in terms of your being. Is you're a mom.
Yeah.
What's important for you as not just as a mom, but as a parent who is trying to instill the same or maybe a different philosophy than what your parents instilled in you or what your parents shared with you to your kids with today's world?
This is a huge one because I'm part of the helicopter parenting generation, as they call us,
yes.
Which is we had such difficulty and challenge that we're trying to mow all of the obstacles out of the way of our children. And I'm wise enough to know that that is clearly doing a disservice to a lot of kids, but I get it because I'm there. I get that you just want to like hug and protect and shelter your child. And that's a tough one because I know what made me. I know what made my parents and I know what made me. And the word, it's an S word and it's struggle. And by taking away obstacles, because you think you're helping your child, you're actually taking away opportunities to build confidence and teach them lessons about life and about themselves. But that's a hard balance, right? And the question is how much struggle do you give your child and how much do you actually protect them from, And so I talked about this on the social the other day, and we were actually talking about a great tennis star, Canadian tennis star, who has just won the US Open. And
still a teenager.
And everyone is comparing her to Serena Williams. And I said, but what they both, again, also have is parents who were tough on them, and in one case, immigrant parents. And Serena Williams's father and Venus's father would hire people to yell racial slurs and all kinds of awful things at their daughters while they were training in their tennis courts in Compton. Because he said, it's what they're going to get, and it's also going to make them tough. And if they can handle this in the middle of Compton with people yelling the worst things that you can yell at a little girl, they can handle anything. Now, that's extreme. I'm not saying that's what I'm hiring nobody to yell slurs at my daughter. But the lesson is you need to allow your children to fall. Yep. You need to allow them to struggle. You need to teach them the lesson that just because you ask, you don't get. Those are the things that I was raised with. I'm trying to figure out on one hand what my parents quote unquote gave me, materially speaking, because that's how we often are showing our love to our children these days, is we think, let's just throw like the latest shoes at them and like the best clothes and like I'm a good parent. It's like the disservice is, it's tremendous. And so my goal as a parent is to have the courage to let my daughter struggle.
Who inspires you?
My parents inspire me first and foremost. The older I get, the more that I'm in this parenting jungle, you do realize, sometimes too late, in some cases, that they were right about so many things. And the stories that I was just sharing about struggle, I appreciate their struggle for what they really were trying to give to me and to my sister in a way I never thought possible before. I mean, you're so egocentric, especially as a young teen. It's all about me and I'm a victim and life's so hard and why don't you just give me the car for tonight? Like, why can't I just go out with my friends? And like, there's that thing that happens when you become a parent. And when I think now, especially of the sacrifices they made of emigrating from their countries to a whole new world. I just came back from a family reunion in Portugal that I organized, and my dad doesn't get back there probably as often as he should, but that's where his whole family still is. And it was our first visit since my paternal grandmother passed last year. And so as my daughter's getting older, it's really important for me to create those roots for her to understand, who she is. But it's also a gift that I want to give her to understand who her grandfather is, because she will only have him for so long. Sure. And so I'm trying to get those memories in her, because I'm only starting to fully appreciate the sacrifice of my father, who was in the Portuguese army and served in Guinea and Angola, and that's scary, and then deciding that he had this wild dream and he was going to go do it in Canada, knew nobody here, and those things on paper, they can almost go over your head so fast until you sit there.
Yeah.
And my dad, the first day he came to Toronto, didn't know anybody and had a few bucks in his pocket, which is the story that everybody tells because it's extraordinary today, and yet it was such an ordinary, everyday story for mostly men back then. And he slept under the gardener. And women, yes, yeah. I felt like there's a lot of women that I've spoken to that were far more resourceful, like they had a bed set up for when they landed, and my dad didn't have that. He didn't think about that.
Women are more.
He didn't call and be like, hey, I'm coming to Canada. Can I stay with you for a few days? It was like he landed and slept under the Gardiner Expressway. And to this day, you drive under that spot where he told us, and it just freaks me out. It just freaks me out because he's celebrating 40 years of his successful business. Like, it's a wild thing. And so when you talk about admiration, there's not enough admiration for sacrifice. My mother was the first year from the Philippines, and not only didn't know anybody here, but got herself 2 jobs the day she got here to be able to send money back to the Philippines. And she's the eldest of 7 siblings. She paid for education for all of her siblings while she was in Canada, and then started to sponsor them here one at a time. Like, she single-handedly is responsible for any of her family being in Canada because she worked a gajillion jobs and never slept. Like, I don't have that fortitude, and I've been given every opportunity in the world, but that fortitude allowed me to be sitting here. And like, I think some days, yeah, I'm so courageous, and then I'm like, oh wait,
you're not.
I am not.
Wow. What's next?
Continuing to conquer the world. What's next? When I say the world, it's like my world. I'm not done. In fact, I feel like I'm just beginning to explore different sides of me and to share that person with everybody around me, be it sort of privately in my sphere or professionally speaking. And I've got a couple of projects where, of course, they're television based, but they're different. And there is a great line that at some point in your life, you want to move from just striving for success to striving for significance. And I've been very lucky to be very successful in my life. And now it's time to do something of significance. Not to mean that that doesn't mean it's successful, but you're not necessarily doing it just for the accolades. You're doing it because you want to contribute something of value and of substance for you, your family, and a legacy. Like, you hit 40 and you realize you're on the back half of your life. So what are you going to do with it? And that's just the beauty of wisdom and getting a little older and wiser, and that's where I'm at. So I've got a couple of projects where I want to do something that hits people in their heart and pushes them to have conversations that they probably want to have and are too scared to have, and I'm going to help them have them. That's a tease.
Well, that is a tease. But when you say striving for significance is what you want to focus on,
yes.
is I think a perfect note to end on. Melissa, your story is always impactful. It's impactful to us, and I hope it's impactful to the listeners, and that's why we invited you. As you know, you have a great amount of energy, so keep at it.
That's being the parent of a 5-year-old.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, that means
Endurance.
that you don't have any energy.
Yeah. Well, that's because you're right, but that's why I'm only having one.
Smart.
Yeah.
Also smart. Well, Melissa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's anything else you want to share with us, social media handle, Twitter handle, Instagram, by all means, share it now.
Absolutely. Wait, when are you launching this podcast?
Very soon this fall.
This fall?
Yeah.
Okay, well, my handle's at Melissa Grelo, pretty much across all platforms. And then soon to be melissagrelo.com also.
Excellent. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Enrico Colantoni here, actor, director, and dedicated napper. Like what you heard today, there's more to come. Make sure to subscribe to Behind Greatness and learn about our live events at inspirenorth.com. You'll also find links to our social media right on our website, so be sure to give us a like and follow. Until next time, stay inspired.